If there's one ingredient that crops up in almost every recipe, it has to be the onion. And if you're growing your own, then you'll need to know when to harvest the bulbs, how to cure them so that they store for months on end, and how to avoid any tears when you come to eat them. Do you grow your onions from seeds or from sets? I do both, and in my very weedy allium bed, I've got some very rusty garlic to harvest, last year's leeks starting to flower, and a patch of brown onions that I planted as sets in the autumn. Perhaps the most obvious sign that it's time to harvest your onions is that the stems will begin to flop over and even turn yellow. Normally the stems stand upright, but as the bulbs approach maturity, the necks will start to soften. After the stems flop over, you should begin to notice that characteristic papery skin beginning to form around the edge of the bulb, particularly on brown onions where that colour change is very distinctive. As you can see here, these onions are starting to go brown from the base upwards, and after being processed, they should look just like the onions we recognise in the shop. Give the plant a gentle squeeze a couple of inches above the neck, just to test that it wasn't physically knocked over, and if the neck is soft, then that onion should be ready to harvest. However, in the case of this onion here, the skin has started to form around the bulb, but the stems haven't drooped or started to change colour, so this one didn't finish developing. And in fact, if we take a closer look, we can see a new stem with an immature flower at the top. These are called scapes, and while all allium flowers are indeed very beautiful to look at, they take energy away from the main bulb, and the larger they grow, the less well the onion's going to store, and the tougher it'll be when you come to eat it. So the best thing you can do when you see scapes are to cut them off and slice them up and fry them, as they are also edible. And then harvest and use this onion first, because it's already stopped growing and it won't keep very well. Once your onions are ready to harvest, you'll need to pull them up carefully so that they store for as long as possible. Avoid damaging the foliage or pressing hard on the bulbs. It's better to lift the bulb by loosening the soil with a fork, keeping as many of the roots intact as possible. Try not to bruise the onion as you do this, or it could end up rotting in storage. And if you see any onions that look bruised or otherwise damaged, don't try and preserve them. Instead, use them straight away as you would any onion that you'd buy from the shops. Sets planted in the autumn can be ready to harvest by late spring or early summer the following year, while seeds or sets sown in the spring can be ready by the late summer or in the autumn. But if the bulbs aren't ready and they still have firm stems, don't panic, you can always harvest early and eat what you have. Before the onions go into storage, we need to dry them out as much as possible. That requires warmth and strong airflow. If the weather's on your side, space out your bulbs on a wire rack or directly on the soil and place them in full sun to cure. Otherwise, you can always use a greenhouse, which gives you protection from the rain. Curing should take around 2 weeks until the stems completely dry out, the necks become firm and the outer skins have had the chance to toughen up. To test if they're done, you can cut into a stem, and if it looks like the plant is starting to bleed, then they aren't dry enough and they won't store well. However, if they're crumpled like paper, they're ready to go into storage. When they're done in here, I'll put them in a paper bag or even try and plat them the old-fashioned way. I'll store them somewhere dark, cool and dry for several months. Onions harvested in the summer should keep well into the winter, while those harvested in autumn should be good into the new year. And if you're unsure if these plastic greenhouses are any good, or if they're worth the money, then check out this video here. Otherwise, as always, happy gardening.